I just knew something really, really bad happened in the house, and the cops just kept saying, yeah, it's not good.
September 24th, 2024. That's the night a quiet San Antonio neighborhood learned that evil doesn't always announce itself with screams. When police arrived at a modest home on Cielo Ranch around 9:20 p.m., they were expecting a medical emergency, maybe a tragic accident. What they found was a 10-year-old boy named Michael Miranda lying lifeless on the floor, wearing nothing but a diaper, his body so emaciated you could see every bone. His adoptive parents, Jonathan and Christina Miranda, looked like anyone else on that street. They washed their dog, watered their plants, went to church every Sunday. Neighbors had seen them for years with their kids playing outside. But Michael? Nobody had ever seen Michael outside, not once. While 4 or 5 children ran around that neighborhood freely, Jonathan and Christina kept Michael locked inside a laundry room for an entire year, beaten with wooden paddles nearly every day, thrown to the floor until he stopped moving, left to starve in his own filth. The medical examiner would later find fractured ribs in different stages of healing, a lacerated intestine from blunt force trauma, injuries so severe they used the word in official documents. This was Christina's own nephew, a child she'd adopted, promised to protect. The question isn't just what these parents did to Michael Miranda, it's how 2 people could torture a child for a year while maintaining a perfect facade to everyone around them. Before we dive in, if you find this case interesting, please remember to give it a like at the end and share your thoughts in the comments. It really helps the channel grow. Also, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing viewers from different places. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so you don't miss future cases. Thank you. This case is presented strictly for educational and documentary purposes. Nothing here is meant to glorify or support any of the actions or individuals involved. Viewer discretion is advised.
911, what's your emergency?
The 911 call came in around 9:20 p.m. A child not breathing. Parents frantically trying to revive him. When paramedics and officers arrived at the home in the 5600 block of Cielo Ranch, they rushed inside, expecting to save a life. What followed was an investigation that would reveal one of the most severe child abuse cases San Antonio detectives had documented in decades. Built entirely on court records, forensic evidence, and witness testimony. Michael was lying there in just a diaper, and the first thing everyone noticed was how small he was. Not just short for his age, but skeletal. You could count his ribs through his skin. His limbs looked impossibly thin, like they might snap if you touched them. While paramedics worked desperately to revive him, they documented what they saw. Bruises in various colors, meaning different ages. Abrasions on his face and legs. Open sores where his diaper had been. This wasn't just a sick child. This was a child who'd been systematically destroyed. Outside, neighbors were gathering, drawn by the flashing lights and police tape. One neighbor later told reporters she watched Christina Miranda collapse to the ground, inconsolable, crying hysterically as they brought out a small black body bag. To everyone watching, it looked like devastated parents losing their child to some terrible illness or accident. But the officers inside that house, their focus had already shifted from rescue to investigation. Because they'd seen the laundry room, officers asked where Michael had been staying. Jonathan and Christina led them to a laundry room off the main living area. What they saw inside became the foundation for capital murder charges. The room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, feces crusted into floor tiles, pet bathroom pads covered in waste, scattered like Michael had been treated as an animal, broken drywall from impact, a body thrown repeatedly. But the detail that made seasoned investigators pause. Poster boards hanging on the walls, covered in handwritten behavior charts, rules and check marks tracking whether Michael had obeyed that day, whether he'd earned the privilege of food, of being cleaned, of basic human dignity. Jonathan and Christina had literally been keeping score of their son's suffering. The home had 5 other children, all healthy looking, all obviously cared for, all living normally in the rest of the house, while Michael was confined to that room. Michael Miranda wasn't always locked in that laundry room. 6 years earlier, when Christina Miranda adopted her own nephew, he was a bubbly kid who'd just beaten brain cancer. Sharon Webb, his grandmother, remembers him singing constantly, obsessed with Paw Patrol, lighting up whenever he got new shoes. A survivor at age 4 who deserved a fresh start with family who'd protect him. Christina and Jonathan had all 6 of their children homeschooled, which in Texas means something very specific: absolutely zero oversight. No notification to school districts, no welfare checks, no home visits, no required testing. Once you say we're homeschooling, your children vanish from every monitoring system. No teachers seeing them daily, no school nurses noticing weight loss, no counselors asking why a child suddenly stopped showing up. That invisibility is exactly what Jonathan and Christina needed, because at some point, the children said at least a year before his death, possibly longer, Michael stopped being treated like their son and started being treated like something they needed to contain. Their attorney later claimed Michael had severe reactive attachment disorder, that he was headbanging, attacking family members, requiring specialized care even institutions struggle to provide. The defense wanted people to see overwhelmed parents, not monsters. But here's what doesn't show up in rad cases: fractured ribs that heal and break again, starvation while siblings eat normally, a child confined to one room while 5 others play freely in the same house. What shows up in rad cases is trauma. What shows up in this case is torture. Homeschooling gave Jonathan and Christina exactly what they needed to hide it: a legal system that never required anyone to lay eyes on Michael Miranda again. Within hours of Michael's death, San Antonio PD and Child Protective Services launched a joint investigation. First priority? The 5 surviving children, each interviewed separately so their stories couldn't influence each other. What those kids described was so consistent, so detailed, that it left zero doubt about what happened in that house. Michael had been locked in the laundry room for at least a year, maybe longer, but a full year they were certain about. Jonathan and Christina beat him almost daily with wooden paddles. Not discipline, not correction. The children watched their parents strike Michael hard enough to knock him down, hit him while he screamed and begged them to stop, hit him if he lowered his arms from the corner where he stood for hours with his hands above his head. Then they described something worse. Jonathan and Christina would grab Michael by his feet and repeatedly throw him to the floor until he became unresponsive. Court documents detail these incidents from multiple witness accounts. The phrase the children used, "until he stopped moving," told detectives everything. This wasn't parents losing control. This was calculated. Michael wore diapers constantly, and when he soiled them, his parents wouldn't clean him. The children said he'd sit in his own waste for hours, sometimes days. The smell from that laundry room overwhelmed other parts of the house, and Michael was always hungry, always asking for food. But Jonathan and Christina fed him just enough to keep him breathing, nothing close to what they gave their other children. Every word checked out. The fecal stains weren't just on the floor. They were ground into walls, crusted in corners. Months of a child left in filth. The broken drywall showed impact patterns from a body thrown repeatedly. Those behavior charts documenting Michael's compliance, they proved this wasn't rage, it was systematic. Parents tracking their son's suffering like a science experiment. Police also obtained video footage showing abuse, though the content hasn't been released. Between 5 children's identical testimonies, physical evidence throughout that room, medical findings, and actual video documentation, investigators built what legal experts would later call an airtight case. The investigation took 8 days, September 24th to October 2nd. 8 days to coordinate with CPS, conduct forensic interviews, process the scene, wait for preliminary autopsy results, and compile everything into arrest warrants. Not rushed, thorough. Because what they'd found was so overwhelming that capital murder charges were inevitable. If the investigation revealed how Michael lived his last year, the autopsy revealed what that year did to his body. The Bexar County Medical Examiner's findings were so severe that veteran investigators, people who'd worked child abuse cases for decades, called this among the worst they'd ever seen. Cause of death? A lacerated lower intestine causing internal bleeding and sepsis. The medical examiner's report documented the injury. The force required to cause this internal rupture was consistent with severe abdominal trauma. This doesn't happen from accidents or falls. Someone caused this intentionally. The forensic evidence left no doubt. But that fatal injury was just the final chapter. Michael's ribs were fractured, multiple breaks in different locations. The critical detail? Those fractures were in various stages of healing. Fresh breaks, weeks-old breaks, months-old breaks. Every time his ribs started to mend, they got broken again. His body was a timeline of repeated violence. Both legs showed trauma from beatings or restraints. His arm was severely dislocated, the joint pulled apart with significant force. Head trauma, consistent with being thrown on hard surfaces. His back and buttocks displayed bruising in stages, yellow-green from old injuries, purple-black from new ones, creating a visual timeline of systematic abuse. Abrasions covered his face, legs, and feet, the kind you get from being thrown on rough surfaces or dragged. Internal injuries to his neck suggested either strangulation attempts or his head being violently jerked. Widespread hemorrhaging throughout his torso meant internal bleeding from multiple impacts in multiple locations. In his diaper area, where he'd been left sitting in waste, large infected sores had developed. The medical examiner also documented severe rectal prolapse, a condition typically seen only in cases of extreme neglect. Detective Maria Gonzalez, lead investigator on the case, would later tell reporters, quote, "In 30 years, I've never seen this level of sustained torture on a child. This wasn't moments of anger. This was a year-long execution." The examination revealed deliberate starvation. Medical examiners described Michael as, quote, "somewhat emaciated." Clinical language that doesn't capture what it means for a 10-year-old. His stomach was distended, bloated from malnutrition, in that cruel paradox where starving bodies swell. His growth was severely stunted for his age. Every marker indicated chronic, deliberate starvation, while living in a house where 5 siblings ate normally. The autopsy made one thing undeniable. Michael didn't die from any accident or medical condition. He died because his adoptive parents tortured him for at least a year, and on September 24th, they inflicted trauma severe enough to rupture his intestine. The broken ribs, the emaciation, the infected sores, the bruises and rainbow stages of healing. Those were just the catalog of every day he survived before that final, fatal injury. October 2nd, 2024. San Antonio police arrested Jonathan Miranda, age 34, and Christina Miranda, age 32, charging both with capital murder. The bail hearing revealed how seriously the court took these charges. $1.5 million each, $3 million total. That's the number reserved for the absolute worst offenses. Defendants who pose a flight risk and danger to others. More than a year later, as of November 2025, neither has made bail. Both still sit in Bexar County Jail, waiting for trial. Their defense attorney, Joseph Holscher, immediately launched an aggressive media campaign.
A number of emotional issues, cognitive impairment due to a prior brain tumor. He also had something called reactive attachment disorder, which can be very intense.
Holscher says the child would often bang his head against the wall, soil himself, and at times even charge at people, including his siblings.
These kids do engage in self-harm. They engage in behaviors that are considered extremely abnormal. Kids with severe cases of RAD almost always end up institutionalized because they require 24/7 care that is specialized. There were a lot of both psychological professionals and medical professionals involved. And he saw different professionals regularly. In fact, there were appointments not long before this. Follow the evidence, because if you miss a step or make a mistake, you destroy families and you destroy kids.
Police rushed the investigation for headlines. Michael's reactive attachment disorder explained his injuries. The family desperately sought help for years. He accused investigators of seizing electronics without proper review, ignoring medical records that would allegedly prove the Miranda's innocence. Child abuse experts reviewing the public evidence aren't buying it. Carrie Wilcoxon, a former state investigator with 30 years of experience, called the case, quote, "predatorial," end quote.
Abuse is not even a strong enough word to describe what this child went through. This is predatorial, meaning these parents, these caregivers, it appears in the affidavit, intentionally targeted this child, intentionally harmed, and ultimately caused the death of this child. What I usually found in those type of cases was someone, some adult, a family member, a neighbor, a friend, somebody usually knows that this is happening and does not make the report.
Which brings us to the 5 surviving children. CPS took emergency custody immediately after the arrests. They were initially placed with a family from Grace Community Church, the congregation where the Mirandas supposedly had tremendous support, before being transferred to foster care. A judge ordered immediate therapy and home studies for children who watched their brother tortured to death and now face the reality that their parents are charged with his murder. As of November 2025, the case remains in pretrial proceedings. No trial date is set, which is typical. Capital murder cases usually take 1 to 3 years because of the complexity, evidence volume, and charge severity. The medical examiner's final report is still listed as pending, though prosecutors say they're finalizing their review. If convicted, both Jonathan and Christina face mandatory life imprisonment without parole under current Texas law. The death penalty isn't available for this charge without additional aggravating circumstances, but based on the evidence already public, multiple child witnesses giving identical accounts, extensive medical documentation, physical evidence from that laundry room, video footage of abuse, legal experts say the prosecution has built a case that's going to be extremely difficult to overcome. A jury will have to decide, were these overwhelmed parents caring for a disturbed child, or were they monsters who tortured their nephew to death while the world looked away? Michael Miranda should be 11 years old right now. He should be starting 6th grade, maybe still watching Paw Patrol reruns, riding his bike through that Cielo Ranch neighborhood where nobody ever saw him play. Instead, his grandmother had to bury a 10-year-old who weighed as much as a 1st grader, whose body told the story of a year spent in a prison disguised as a laundry room. Jonathan and Christina Miranda looked normal. They watered their plants. They went to church. Neighbors saw them washing their dog, while 15 feet away through a wall, their nephew was suffering abuse that would ultimately prove fatal. 5 children lived in that house and went outside to play while Michael was confined to a room covered in his own waste. A church community claimed to support the family. Doctors allegedly treated Michael. How does a child die from starvation and daily beatings while surrounded by people? The trial will answer what Jonathan and Christina did, but it won't answer the bigger question. How many other Michaels are locked in laundry rooms right now, hidden by homeschool laws that require zero oversight, invisible to every system designed to protect them? If this case made you think about oversight, about mandatory reporter contact, about how isolation enables abuse, that's the conversation we need to keep having. I'm covering the trial as it develops, along with similar cases where children vanished in plain sight. If you want to stay informed on true crime intel, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me what case you want covered next, or just let me know where you're watching from. Michael Miranda's story doesn't end with his death. It ends when we make sure this can't happen again.